Hello, this is the 5.11 lesson, The Watergate Scandal. Excuse me. Despite Richard Nixon's successes at home and abroad, he was deeply insecure about his presidency. He was constantly on guard against political enemies, real or perceived, and could be vindictive towards anyone who opposed him. On June 17, 1972, 5 months into his second term as president, police arrested 5 burglars inside the Democratic Committee's headquarters at the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. Subsequent investigations into the break-in would reveal abuses of power by Nixon and lead to a scandal that would shake Americans' faith in their government and unmake a president. Goals for this lesson: trace the major events of the Watergate scandal and their consequences, assess the constitutional issues involved in the Watergate scandal and investigation, and describe the effect of the Watergate scandal on the political process in the United States. And when you go to lesson resources, grab your reading guide and or lesson answer key, and also the Watergate and the Constitution sheet is another activity you'll be completing today. So starting on page 880, let's read about the Watergate scandal. Watergate, the unmaking of a president. There were two sides to Richard Nixon. He could aspire to noble goals, as he showed by reaching out to China and the Soviet Union, but he was also deeply insecure. He was constantly on guard against political enemies, real or perceived, and vindictive towards anyone who opposed him. That fearful, vindictive side triggered a chain of events that destroyed his presidency. Abuses of power. The first glimpse of the Nixon administration's secret battle against his opponents came in June 1972 when police arrested 5 burglars inside the Democratic National Committee's headquarters at the Watergate, a business and residential complex in Washington, D.C. Initially, the break-in seemed like a run-of-the-mill robbery. But later revelations showed that some of the Watergate burglars had ties to the Nixon White House and were part of a group called the Committee to Re-elect the President. One of the burglars, G. Gordon Liddy, had occupied various positions at the Nixon White House and was a staff member on the president's re-election campaign. The arrest led to investigations by reporters, Congress, and federal prosecutors that uncovered widespread illegal activities conducted on Nixon's behalf. These abuses of power had begun a year earlier when Nixon and Kissinger were startled by the unauthorized release of classified Defense Department documents that revealed the origins of Americans' policy in Vietnam. After both the New York Times and the Washington Post published these so-called Pentagon Papers, Nixon moved to prevent further leaks of secret government information to reporters. Fearing that federal agencies harbored Democratic sympathizers who would try to undermine him, Nixon authorized a special espionage team, the Plumbers, to plug the leaks by spying on reporters and the suspected sources inside the government. Kind of a nice little play on word there, the Plumbers. To stop leaks. Nixon had authorized the creation of a political enemies project, a long list of his critics in government, business, and the media, the entertainment industry, and labor unions. In 1971, a memo about the enemies list, White House Chief Counsel John Dean said the list was compiled to consider how we can use the available federal machinery to screw our political enemies in the period leading up to the 1972 election. Some misdeeds were relatively minor dirty tricks to disrupt the campaigns of rival presidential candidates. Others were serious crimes, including unauthorized electronic eavesdropping, burglary, and improper audits of opponents' tax records. The Plumbers broke into the offices of a psychiatrist who had treated Daniel Ellsberg, the man who had leaked the Pentagon Papers. Some Nixon aides even conspired to kidnap political opponents of the president and to firebomb the Brookings Institute, a Washington resource organization, though these plans were never carried out. The question of how much Nixon knew about these activities ahead of time has been endlessly debated and never fully resolved. What is clear is that once he learned about them, the president and his top assistants tried hard to cover them up. Shortly after the Watergate burglary, a small group of high-ranking Washington White House officials, including Chief Counsel John Dean, Chief of Staff H.R. Bob Hadelman, and Domestic Policy Advisor John L. Reichman, held a series of meetings with the president in which they made arrangements to pay hush money to secure the silence of the Watergate burglars. Nixon also ordered his aides to get the FBI to back away from the inquiry to the burglary. In legal terms, these acts constituted a crime called obstruction of justice, efforts to interfere with the investigation and prosecution of a crime. Investigation and resignation. Nixon's obstruction of justice were discovered only because of his own decision to install a secret recording system in his White House offices. He said later he had wanted key moments in his presidency to be recorded for posterity. His wish came true, but not in the way he had hoped. The hidden tape recorders captured long conversations that often showed Nixon at his worst, suspicious, mean-spirited, and profane. The existence of the tapes was revealed during a summer-long Senate investigation in 1973. A Southern Democrat, Senator Sam Ervin of North Carolina, chaired the televised hearings. Millions of Americans tuned in, captivated by the bitter drama of a presidency that seemed to be unraveling before their eyes. The key witness was John Dean, the former White House lawyer who told the senators he had worked with Nixon to conceal the administration's role in the Watergate burglary. The White House denounced Dean as a liar. When the other side noted the existence of the secret tape recording system in the White House, a year-long battle over the tapes ensued. Here's just pictures of the Watergate proceedings. Prosecutors, judges, and Congress, including a committee considering Nixon's impeachment, demanded all of their recordings. When Archibald Cox, the Harvard law professor assigned a special prosecutor to investigate Watergate, pursued a court order to demand release of the tapes, Nixon ordered his Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, to fire Cox. Richardson refused and resigned in protest. Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus also refused to fire Cox and also resigned. Nixon did manage to get Cox fired in October 20th, 1973. The firing and the resignations known as the Saturday Night Massacre only strengthened the resolve of Nixon's critics to get hold of the White House recordings. Under pressure from all sides, Nixon agreed to release some, but not all of the tapes. One critical recording, there was an 18.5-minute gap. The president's secretary, Rosemary Woods, claimed she accidentally erased a section while reviewing the tapes, but few people believed her account. To deflect criticism, Nixon released heavily edited transcripts of other tapes, which only raised further questions about his trustworthiness. Finally, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Nixon must turn over the tapes. As Americans would soon learn, the president had every reason to keep them from the public. One tape captured Nixon discussing how the Watergate burglars could be hushed. "You could get the money. What I mean is you could get $1 million, and you can get it in cash. I know where it could be gotten. I mean, it's not easy, but it could be done." In another recording, the president and his chief of staff, Bob Hadelman, discussed the FBI's investigation of the Watergate burglary and consider a plan to get the FBI to back off the case by having the CIA claim that the break-in was related to a national security. In this tape conversation, Hadelman tells Nixon, "The way to handle this now is for have Vernon Waters, deputy director of the CIA, call Pat Gray, acting director of the FBI, and just say, 'Stay the hell out of this. This is some business we don't want you going any further on.'" This tape was quickly labeled the smoking gun in the case against the president, the clear evidence that he had taken part in a crime, a conspiracy to cover up his administration's role in Watergate. His remaining supporters in Congress deserted him. With impeachment and removal from office virtually certain, Nixon, on October 9, 1974, became the first president to resign the office. He did not admit guilt, but said he no longer held enough support in Congress to lead the country. "To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent in every instinct of my body," he told the national audience, "but as president, I must put the interests of America first." On his last morning as president, Nixon shook hands with the vice president, Gerald Ford, and walked outside to a waiting helicopter. A military guard stood at attention. Nixon ascended the steps to the helicopter and just before entering turned once more and flashed a double V for victory sign he had used throughout so many campaigns. And then he was gone. And there's the picture of him leaving with his double V. The legacy of Watergate. The Watergate scandal turned out to be more than a burglary, more than just a cover-up. In the course of the Watergate hearings, a number of other offenses came to light. In the end, the specific offenses were not what people most remembered. Rather, Watergate had a larger, deeper, more lasting effect. Along with the Vietnam War, Watergate shook Americans' faith in their government and created a new cynicism about politics. A 1964 poll revealed that more than 3/4 of Americans believed that they could trust the government to do the right thing, either always or most of the time. In 1980, barely 1/4 of Americans still believe that. Okay, so let's go back to the lesson. Make sure you check your answers with the lesson answer key for your reading guide. And then let's continue on. The unmaking of a president. What could cause the downfall of an American president? In 1868, Andrew Johnson became the first U.S. president to be impeached and came within one vote of being convicted and removed from office. Would the Watergate scandal lead to impeachment for Richard Nixon? Okay, follow the directions in the student guide to begin today's lesson. After you have finished the reading assignment, which we have, complete the Watergate and the Constitution activity sheet. Check the Watergate and the Constitution page on the National Archives website and other references if you need help completing the sheet. And here's this other website. And it's Watergate and the Constitution, a chronology of events. But if we look at the sheet, we're just going into the background, finding the dates. 1972, June, 5 burglars are arrested while attempting to repair surveillance equipment previously installed in the Watergate offices of the... Oh, where was that website? Nope, it's not it. And we're talking, you're just going along. Here we go, June, Democratic National Committee headquarters. And then you'd put that onto your sheet and just continue on going through the timeline of events and answering the questions. Do your best on it. You could also, of course, check your answers. The answers for this are also on the lesson answer key, as you can see here. So you can check your answers that way as well. We won't go through all of it together now. And then when you're done with all of that, there is a beyond the lesson you can take part in. Oh, wait a minute. I need to go back to the lesson. I skipped over something that in the inset I wanted to read, reporting the scandal. Okay, sorry about that. Upon first reports of the Watergate burglary, most Washington reporters dismissed it as a minor crime not worth further attention. But as two young reporters at the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, pursued the story. They traced connections between the burglars, the White House, and Nixon's re-election campaign. Their coverage kept the episode before the public, spurring prosecutors and judges to ask questions that eventually revealed a sprawling pattern of illegal activity. There's a picture of Woodward and Bernstein. One of Woodward's sources was a mysterious informant with first-hand knowledge of the Watergate investigation. Woodward and his informant met secretly in dimly lit parking garages in the middle of the night. Woodward promised not to reveal the source's identity, whom a Post editor nicknamed Deep Throat. In 1974, Woodward and Bernstein published a story of their Watergate investigation, All the President's Men. The book was a bestseller and became a popular movie. Both the book and the movie kept the American public guessing who Deep Throat might be. For more than 30 years, people speculated about the secret source's identity. Then in 2005, Mark Felt, former deputy director of the FBI, revealed he had been Woodward's source. Woodward confirmed it. Felt, who had been angry at Nixon for choosing a political appointee as FBI director instead of himself, had helped to bring down a president. Felt died in 2008. Okay, now if we go back, make sure then you complete the 5.11 checkpoint, and then you are done with this lesson. Good luck and goodbye.